The morning sunlight spilled gently across the cream curtains of our bedroom, landing on the silver-framed photo from our wedding day, the one Daniel said he'd always cherish. 25 years. A lifetime, I thought. I could still remember the way his eyes sparkled as we exchanged vows, promising forever in front of everyone we loved. But as I reached out to touch that photo, my hand trembled. Something in me already knew. Today would change everything. It was our silver wedding anniversary, and I had planned every detail. The dinner reservation, the candlelight, the surprise slideshow of our memories. I wanted the night to remind us of everything we'd survived together. 2 kids, financial struggles, the sleepless years, and the quiet victories that only a long marriage knows. But Daniel had been distant for weeks. His phone, once casually left on the counter, now never left his pocket. His eyes, once warm, now carried a faint restlessness I couldn't name. When he came into the kitchen that morning, he looked different. New suit, crisp cologne, hair combed perfectly as if for someone else. "Morning," I said softly, pouring his coffee the way he liked. 1 sugar, no cream. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile people give strangers. "Morning, Naomi. You don't have to make breakfast today." I blinked. "Why not? It's our anniversary." He hesitated for a moment, then set his briefcase down. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." There was a strange stillness in the air. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause between ticks. He reached into his coat pocket, and for a foolish second my heart fluttered, maybe a necklace, a note, something sentimental. But what he placed on the counter wasn't wrapped in gold or ribbon. It was an envelope. I stared at it. "What's this?" He took a deep breath. "Naomi, I think 25 years is long enough. You've been great. We've had a good life, but I want something new now. Someone young. I'm moving on." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. My ears buzzed with disbelief. "Excuse me?" I whispered. He didn't even look ashamed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll be fine. I'll make sure you're comfortable." The words hit harder than any slap could. Comfortable. Like he was talking about an old piece of furniture he was replacing. I felt the coffee mug slip slightly in my hands. "Daniel," I said, trying to steady my voice, "today is our anniversary." "I know, and that's exactly why I'm telling you now. A clean break." He looked at his watch. "The guests are still coming tonight, right? Let's just make it through the evening. We'll talk details after." I wanted to scream, cry, demand an explanation, but something inside me froze. Years of dignity, years of being the steady one held me still. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice trembling. He sighed as if I was inconveniencing him. "Naomi, don't make it dramatic. People fall out of love all the time." He left then without waiting for my reply, just grabbed his car keys and walked out the door. The sound of his engine fading was the sound of 25 years collapsing into silence. I stood there for a long time staring at that envelope. Divorce. The man who once promised to grow old with me now wanted someone young enough to call him Danny instead of Dad. I walked slowly to the window. Outside, the October morning looked calm. The same neighborhood, the same trees, the same sky. But inside me, a storm was rising. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up helping him with work, the times I patched our marriage when he'd grown distant, the sacrifices I made for his dreams. And now he wanted to erase me, like I was a chapter he finished reading. I could have broken down right there, but instead, a strange calm washed over me. The kind that doesn't come from peace, but from clarity. If Daniel wanted to humiliate me, if he wanted to trade 25 years for a midlife fantasy, he picked the wrong woman to underestimate. I looked at our wedding photo again, my younger self so full of hope holding his hand. "Don't worry," to her, I whispered. "We'll give him something he'll never forget." That night's anniversary party would no longer be a celebration. It would be a performance, and my husband was about to star in it. That evening, the house was glowing with soft amber lights, and the scent of roses filled every corner. From the outside, it looked like a perfect anniversary celebration. Silver balloons, candlelit tables, laughter floating through the halls. But inside me, there was only stillness. Every sound felt distant, like I was watching my own life from across the room. Daniel had been gone most of the day, saying he had meetings, but I knew better. His cologne lingered too strongly, and there was a faint trace of lipstick on his shirt collar that wasn't mine, a soft coral shade I'd never worn. I didn't confront him, not yet. Tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about revelation. I watched him from across the living room as guests started to arrive. Friends, colleagues, even some of our old neighbors. He laughed too loudly, touched his hair too often, and kept checking his phone, probably waiting for a message from the woman who had replaced me in her heart. His mother, Elaine, sat elegantly near the piano, watching everything with her usual judgmental smile. She'd never liked me, never forgiven me for being too independent for her son. Now I understood why she'd been so cheerful lately. She already knew. "Naomi, darling," a friend called out, hugging me warmly. "You look radiant. Daniel must be so proud of you both. 25 years. I smiled mechanically. Yes, 25 years. Quite an achievement, isn't it? She didn't notice the edge in my voice. No one ever does until it's too late. The party went on, laughter echoing, music playing softly. But around 9, as I was refilling glasses, I heard something, a whisper, coming from Daniel's office down the hall. The door was slightly open and I caught the low murmur of voices. His and Elaine's. "She doesn't suspect a thing," Daniel was saying, his tone sharp but excited. "She better not," Elaine replied coldly. "We've waited long enough. Once she signs the papers, everything goes smoothly. Just remember, she can't know about the condo transfer." My breath caught. Condo transfer. My parents had gifted us that condo when we first married. It was legally in my name, or so I thought. My pulse quickened. I moved closer, my heels barely making a sound on the carpet. Daniel chuckled quietly and said, "Relax, Mom. I've already spoken to a lawyer. She won't see it coming. By tomorrow, it'll all be done." Elaine's voice softened, almost gleeful. "Good. That girl you've been seeing, she deserves a fresh start with you, not a messy divorce." My stomach turned. The girl you've been seeing. So it was true. There was someone else. All the signs, the sudden gym membership, the new cologne, the constant secrecy, it all made sense now. I backed away quietly, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid they'd hear it. For a moment, I stood at the end of the hallway, gripping the banister, breathing through the ache in my chest. 25 years, and this was my reward. But tears didn't come. Not yet. Instead, an idea began to form. Dark, sharp, and precise. If Daniel wanted a new life, he could have it. But not before I showed him exactly what he was throwing away. I returned to the living room with a calm smile, just as Dana reappeared, straightening his jacket. "Everything okay?" he asked, pretending to be casual. "Perfect," I said sweetly. "Everything's exactly as it should be." The next hour felt like moving through a dream. Toasts were made, laughter filled the air, and Daniel played the part of a devoted husband perfectly. Every time he slipped his arm around me for photos, I felt the chill of his betrayal beneath his warmth. At one point, his phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen, a message from MLE with a heart emoji. I met his eyes and smiled faintly. He didn't notice that I'd seen it. He never noticed much about me anymore. Later, after most guests had eaten and settled, Daniel tapped a spoon against his glass. "Everyone," he began, "thank you for coming tonight to celebrate 25 wonderful years with my beautiful wife," Daniel repeated, flashing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The crowd clapped, glasses lifted, camera flashes sparkled like tiny bursts of lightning. I stood beside him, my hand resting lightly on his arm, pretending everything was perfect. I had spent years playing the role of the loyal wife. One more night wouldn't kill me. He went on, his voice dripping with false charm. Naomi has stood by me through thick and thin. She's been my rock, my home, my partner. He paused just long enough to look at me with that performative tenderness he used to reserve for boardroom speeches. But sometimes life takes us on new journeys. The words hit differently. New journeys. The guest chuckled, thinking it was some sentimental reflection, but I could see the glint in his eyes, the private meaning behind those words. It wasn't nostalgia, it was farewell. I smiled politely, clinking my glass against his, but inside, my pulse thundered. To new beginnings, he said cheerfully. The irony almost made me laugh. After the toast, I slipped away to the kitchen under the pretense of checking the dessert. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the counter. 25 years of loyalty, love, sacrifice, and he was toasting his way out of it like it was a promotion party. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. No tears tonight. Tears were what he expected. Instead, I needed clarity. I replayed every sign I'd ignored. The late meetings, the new wardrobe, the way his mother's attitude toward me had suddenly softened. Elaine even dropped hints I'd brushed off. You've done your part, Naomi. Maybe it's time for you to rest. Rest. That was their way of saying step aside. When I returned to the living room, the laughter sounded hollow. Daniel was by the fireplace now, surrounded by a few coworkers. His hand moved as he spoke, confident, boastful. The same hand that used to rest gently on my back when we danced. I caught snippets of his conversation. Yeah, the sale should finalize soon. Well, technically, it's under my name now. He stopped when he noticed me nearby, giving that rehearsed smile again. My suspicion tightened into certainty. He wasn't just replacing me emotionally, he was trying to erase me financially. I excused myself quietly and slipped into his office again. The desk was immaculate, but his laptop was open. I hesitated. 25 years of marriage had taught me respect for privacy, but betrayal voids that contract. I clicked open his recent emails. What I found made my stomach drop. There it was. Subject, transfer confirmation, property title. From his lawyer. Message. Documents finalized as discussed. Your wife remains unaware. Signature completed by power of attorney from joint representation. Power of attorney. My own trust had been used against me. The papers I'd signed a month ago, Daniel had said they were for tax filings. My hand trembled over the mouse. He had fooled me into signing away ownership of the condo, the one my parents gave me. I sat back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen, and felt something inside me change. Not just pain, not even anger. Something sharper, focused. I copied the documents onto a USB drive from his drawer and slipped it into my dress pocket. The evidence was mine now. When I returned to the party, the cake had just arrived, silver and white, with 25 beautiful years written in elegant icing. Daniel stood beside it, knife in hand, his arm around my shoulders. Come on, darling, let's cut this together. The flashbulbs went off as we smiled for the camera. His fingers pressed lightly into my shoulder, and the crowd cheered. The picture looked perfect, but no one noticed my eyes weren't smiling. As we cut the cake, Daniel leaned close and whispered, You'll thank me someday, you'll see. I turned slightly, my lips brushing his ear. I already do, I whispered back. He didn't understand what I meant, not yet. Later, as guests began to leave, I stood by the door, thanking each of them, maintaining the facade of the perfect hostess. Elaine approached last, her perfume heavy and her tone syrupy sweet. Lovely evening, Naomi. You've outdone yourself. Thank you, I replied, evenly. But it's not over yet. She raised her eyebrow. Oh? I smiled. I have something special planned for Daniel before the night ends. A surprise. Her face stiffened slightly, unsure how to interpret that. I enjoyed the moment, the first flicker of unease from a woman who always thought she was 2 steps ahead of me.
When the door closed behind her, the house felt quiet. Daniel was in the study now, probably texting the woman who thought she was about to inherit my life. I went upstairs, changed out of my silver gown, and sat at the vanity. My reflection looked different, calmer, stronger, almost detached. 25 years of being the wife who forgave, who stayed silent, who held things together. That woman was gone. I picked up my phone, opened my email, and began drafting a message, not to Daniel, but to someone else entirely. Someone who would help me make sure he never forgot this anniversary for as long as he lived. Tomorrow, Daniel Price would wake up to a life he wouldn't recognize. And for the first time, I'd be the one in control. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself didn't dare disturb the stillness that had settled over my house. Daniel was already gone. I heard his car leave around 6. Typical. He always ran from discomfort. What he didn't realize was that running only made my next move easier. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, the USB drive in my hand, catching the early sunlight. Proof of everything. For years, I had trusted him to lead. Now, I was the one mapping every step. I opened my laptop and began searching names. Law firms, business partners, accounts that Daniel had hidden behind layers of deceit. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to erase me, financially, socially, completely. But revenge, I reminded myself, should never be loud at first. It begins with quiet moves, controlled breaths, the precision of someone who's learned patience from decades of marriage. By 9 a.m., the downtown was like Eleanor Shaw's The Lawyer. I
You have no idea how well I handle things, I replied softly, placing the wine glasses on the table. Daniel smiled, thinking I'd accepted his betrayal like a submissive wife too tired to fight. Let him believe that. Let him underestimate me. It was the sharpest weapon I had. The table was beautifully set, candles flickering, soft music playing in the background, and the scent of rosemary and roasted garlic filling the air. To anyone walking by, we looked like a couple celebrating love, not one quietly preparing for war. He poured himself a generous glass of red wine. "You know," he said, swirling it thoughtfully, "I've been thinking, we could stay friends. I'll help you settle somewhere nice. Maybe a small apartment in Arlington." I almost laughed. "How kind of you," I said. "A charity case after 25 years of marriage." He didn't catch the sarcasm. "It's not like that, Naomi. We've both changed. You want stability, I want excitement." "You mean youth," I said, meeting his eyes. He hesitated for a second. "Don't make it sound ugly." "But it is ugly," I whispered, still smiling. "You just dressed it up in midlife crisis cologne." For the first time, I saw irritation flicker in his gaze. He took another sip, masking his discomfort. I watched him, every gesture, every twitch, memorizing the man I had once loved and now barely recognized. Halfway through dinner, he got a call. He stepped out to take it, whispering in that same low tone I'd heard before. "Yes, she's calm. No, she doesn't suspect anything." His voice dropped. "I'll have her sign the last paper tomorrow, then we're done." When he came back, I had already cleared the plates. "Everything okay?" I asked sweetly. "Work," he lied automatically. "Of course," I said, pretending not to notice the lipstick smudge on his cuff. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, staring at the clock as it ticked past midnight, 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. Daniel's steady snoring filled the silence, a sound that once comforted me, but now felt like mockery. I watched the man beside me, the same man who'd vowed to protect me, now plotting to discard me. And I realized something profound. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was awake.
When betrayal first strikes, it burns like acid. But once it passes through, what's left behind is steel. That's what I felt now. A calm, razor-edged clarity. The sadness was gone, only purpose remained. I turned on my phone's recorder and whispered quietly, "Day 1. My voice sounded different, colder, steadier. He thinks I'm broken. He'll regret that. Over the next few days, I became a shadow in my own home, moving with deliberate grace. Daniel thought my silence meant acceptance. It amused him to think he'd won. Every smile I gave him, every meal I cooked, every kiss goodnight, all of it was part of the mask I wore to perfection. Meanwhile, behind that smile, I was rewriting the end of our story. I called Eleanor every morning with updates. She helped me quietly transfer half the savings into a trust under my parents' name, money he believed he controlled. I collected every document, every message, every recording that could expose what he and his mother were scheming. By the time the anniversary dinner approached, I had built a quiet empire of evidence. Celeste, his mother, called one evening. I let it go to voicemail. Her tone dripped with fake sympathy. "Naomi, dear, Daniel just wants what's best for everyone. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I saved the message, another piece of the puzzle. The morning of our anniversary, Daniel was usually chipper. He wore a new navy suit, the kind he usually saved for business deals. "Ready for tonight?" he asked, kissing my cheek. "It's going to be unforgettable." I smiled. "Oh, I'm counting on it." What he didn't know was that every word he had ever said about me, every insult, every secret plan, was stored neatly in a digital file titled,
"It's going to be unforgettable," Daniel had said that morning. He had no idea how true that would be. By late afternoon, the house was glowing with soft light. I had spent the entire day preparing, not for celebration, but for closure. The dining table gleamed, silver cutlery perfectly aligned, wine glasses polished until they caught reflections of the setting sun. On the sideboard sat a photo frame from our wedding day. Daniel, smiling proudly, his hand wrapped around mine. 25 years ago, I thought that smile meant forever. Now I knew it had an expiration date. He came home at 7 sharp, carrying a small velvet box and wearing that smug half-smile that used to charm me. "You look lovely," he said, eyeing my silver dress, the same one I'd worn 10 years ago at our 15th anniversary. I wore it deliberately, as a symbol. Once it represented love. Tonight, it represented resilience. "Happy anniversary," I said, handing him a glass of wine. He took a sip, glancing around. "You really went all out," he said. "Almost makes me feel guilty." "Almost?" I teased softly, tilting my head. He chuckled. "Don't do that. You know I hate guilt trips." We sat across from each other, candles flickering between us. For a few minutes, we made small talk, the weather, work, trivial things that meant nothing. But beneath the polite conversation, tension pulsed like electricity. I could see it in the way his hands fidgeted with his watch and how he kept glancing toward the briefcase near his chair. That was where he kept the divorce papers. When dessert arrived, a chocolate mousse, his favorite, he cleared his throat. "Naomi, there's something we should talk about." "Of course," I said calmly, setting down my spoon. "Go ahead." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a crisp folder. I thought tonight might be a good time to finalize things. I leaned back slightly, pretending to look surprised. "Finalize?" He smiled carefully. "You know, end things properly. It's not you, Naomi. It's just we've grown apart. I need something new." I stayed silent for a few moments, letting the words hang. It was the same rehearsed cruelty he'd been practicing for weeks. Then I said softly, "Do you remember what you told me on our wedding day?" He frowned, confused. "What?" "I just want to thank you, Daniel, because tonight
We are facing it together. You just don't know it yet." His brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I stood up slowly, crossed to the cabinet, and picked up a small remote. With one click, the living room TV flickered to life. A video started playing. Grainy, timestamp recordings from his phone, his emails projected in crystal clarity across the screen. His voice echoed through the room. "She won't suspect a thing. Once she signs, it's all ours. Don't worry, Mom. She's too naive to see it coming." Daniel froze, his face draining of color. "Naomi, how did you?" I turned toward him, smiling faintly. "You should have changed your passwords, darling." He stood up, panic setting in. "You're overreacting. This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like. But don't worry, I've already sent copies to my lawyer and a few close friends, just in case." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "You planned to humiliate me tonight, didn't you? Serve me papers in front of my guests, tell the world that I wasn't enough anymore." He looked stunned because that had been his plan. "Who told you that?" he blurted. I smiled. "You did. You never realize how loud your secrets can be when whispered to the wrong phone." For the first time in years, Daniel Price, the man who always controlled every conversation, was silent. Completely silent. The air was thick with shock. The candles flickered wildly, as if the truth itself had disturbed the air. I took one slow step closer. "You thought 25 years was a waste, Daniel. But let me show you what those years taught me. How to stand, how to survive, and how to end a story with dignity." And then, with a calmness that terrified him, I picked up the divorce papers he brought and tore them neatly in half. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. He stared, speechless. "Naomi, you can't just—" "I can," I said firmly, "and I will. Because this condo, it's mine. That account you think you emptied, check again. That partnership you thought was hidden, it's registered under my name now." His jaw dropped. You planned this?" "Oh, yes," I whispered. "Every beautiful detail." Then I turned toward the door, my voice steady. "Happy anniversary, Daniel. I hope she's worth everything you've just lost." As I walked out, I heard the faint crash of his wine glass hitting the floor behind me. And for the first time in years, the sound made me smile. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped out of the condo. The sound of the city felt different now, sharper, alive, as though the world itself had been holding its breath for this moment. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped inside a life built around Daniel Price's moods. I was free, completely, fiercely free. I walked down the quiet Georgetown street, my heels clicking against the pavement in rhythm with my heartbeat. The city lights reflected off the rain-soaked road, painting long golden streaks ahead of me, like a path waiting to be claimed. Every step away from that condo was a step toward myself, the woman I had buried beneath years of compromise, silence, and survival. When I reached the corner cafe, the same one we used to visit in our early days, I stopped and looked through the glass. The barista, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled and waved me in. I smiled back, but I didn't go inside. I didn't need nostalgia anymore. That version of me, the hopeful girl who believed love could fix anything, belonged to the past. Back at home, Daniel was probably still pacing, realizing the full scale of what I'd done. He'd find the accounts locked, the assets legally frozen, the lawyer's notice already delivered to his email. Everything he thought he controlled had slipped through his fingers like water. I didn't need to shout or break things or seek revenge through chaos. My revenge was peace. My silence had become my greatest power. I took out my phone and opened the voice notes I had recorded over the last week, my private confessions, my late-night realizations. Listening to them now felt surreal. That trembling voice on day one sounded like a stranger. I deleted them all, except the last one. The one that said, "He thinks I'm broken. He'll regret that." And he did. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, warm and golden. I made myself breakfast, humming softly, something I hadn't done in years. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was finally mine. Around noon, there was a knock on the door. It was Eleanor, my lawyer, holding a file. "You're trending," she said, smiling. I blinked. "What?" She laughed. "Your story. Someone at the restaurant that night posted part of the video you played. It's gone viral. People are calling you the woman who turned betrayal into poetry." I couldn't help but laugh, a real, joyful laugh that came from somewhere deep inside. "Poetry, huh?" "Well," she said, handing me the finalized ownership documents, "if freedom had a sound, it would be your laugh tonight." Later that afternoon, I walked to the riverbank with a small box in my hands. Inside were old photos, a dried boutonniere from our wedding day, and the necklace Daniel gave me on our first anniversary. One by one, I tossed them into the water. The necklace sank last, catching the sunlight as it disappeared beneath the surface. 25 years gone, not erased, but released. As the water rippled, I whispered to myself, "You were right, Daniel. 25 years is long enough. Long enough to become someone new." Back at home, I stood before the mirror, not to fix my makeup or hide my tears, but to look at myself. Really look at myself. The woman staring back wasn't the wife who'd been discarded. She was the storm that followed. A week later, a letter arrived. No name on the front, just familiar handwriting. I opened it. "Naomi, you destroyed everything I worked for. Are you happy now? I hope you realize what you've done. You've ruined me." I read it once, twice, then folded it neatly and dropped it in the trash. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just relief, because ruin was exactly what he needed, not as punishment, but as reflection. That night, I wrote something in my journal, the same one I've been keeping since our first anniversary. Some endings don't need fireworks. Sometimes the quiet walk away is the loudest sound of all. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and slept peacefully for decades. The woman who once whispered in the dark was gone. The woman who spoke her truth and walked into the light, she was just getting.
A month passed. The days no longer blended into one another like they used to. Mornings had purpose now. The quiet hum of the kettle, the sound of birds outside my window, they all felt alive again. I had learned to enjoy the silence that used to haunt me. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter. At first, it was just for distraction, but soon I found meaning in it. The stories I heard were heartbreaking. Women abandoned, deceived, or silenced. Yet in each of them I saw pieces of myself, the same pain, the same strength buried underneath. I wasn't just helping them, I was healing with them. One afternoon, during a group session, a young woman asked, "How do you stop missing the person who hurt you?" I paused before answering. "You don't," I said softly. "You just learned that missing them doesn't mean you want them back. It means you're human. But forgiveness, that's for you, not for them." The room went silent. Then one by one, they nodded. That moment felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, gentle, warm, and freeing. Meanwhile, Daniel's empire began to crumble. Word spread about his unethical business dealings, leaked through anonymous sources. Contracts dissolved, partners withdrew, and investors vanished. The same arrogance that built his success now pulled it apart.
I never had to lift a finger. Karma did what it always does. Arrived late, but arrived perfectly on time. One evening, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was from Daniel. Naomi, I've lost everything. Mom's health is failing. I shouldn't be writing this, but I need to say it. You were right. You always were. I wish I'd listened before it was too late. I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Some things don't need words. My silence was answer enough. That night, I took out my old wedding ring, not to mourn, but to close a circle. I placed it inside a small jewelry box and wrote a note. For the woman I used to be. Thank you for surviving. Then I tucked it into the back of my drawer and smiled. Spring came early that year. The cherry blossoms along the river bloomed brighter than I remembered. I took long walks, sometimes with the camera, capturing moments I used to rush past. An old couple holding hands, a child chasing pigeons, sunlight streaming through leaves. Each photograph became a reminder that beauty exists even after ruin. One Sunday morning, as I sat at my favorite cafe, sipping coffee and reading, a familiar voice called my name, Naomi. I looked up. It was Michael, an old college friend, someone I hadn't seen in over 20 years. He smiled shyly, still holding that same easy charm. I thought that was you. You haven't changed a bit. I laughed. Trust me, I've changed plenty. He sat down and we talked for hours about life, mistakes, forgiveness, and second chances. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the word love. I didn't need it to define me, but maybe, just maybe, it could find me again, on my terms. When I got home that evening, I opened my journal again and wrote, sometimes the story doesn't end when you walk away. Sometimes that's exactly where it begins. I closed the journal and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered across the water, like promises waiting to be fulfilled. For years, I thought my life had ended when Daniel betrayed me. Now I understood that was just the prologue. And as I stood there, breathing in the scent of new beginnings, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow. After 25 years, my husband wanted someone younger, but what I said and what I did left him speechless. And finally, I'm the one who found her voice. Weeks turned into months, and life began to unfold like a story I'd never thought I'd live to see. I had no grand plan, no burning ambition to prove anything anymore. Yet somehow, my story started traveling faster than I could imagine. It began with a message. A journalist from a local magazine reached out. Mrs. Price, your story has inspired thousands. Would you be open to sharing it in your own words? At first, I hesitated. The old me would have said no, too private, too afraid of judgment. But this new version of Naomi had nothing left to hide. The scars that once felt shameful were now my strength, my truth. When the article was published, it was titled, The Woman Who Walked Away: How One Wife Reclaimed Herself After Betrayal. It wasn't sensational, it was honest, raw, vulnerable, and unfiltered. I didn't paint Daniel as a monster. I simply told the truth. How love can blind you, how silence can suffocate you, and how courage can rebuild you. Within days, the story exploded online. Women and even men from around the world flooded my inbox with messages. You told my story. Thank you for reminding me it's not too late to start over. You made me believe healing is possible. Each message felt like a small light flickering in a once dark space. My pain had turned to something greater than revenge. It had become resonance. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference. I almost said no, but Eleanor convinced me. You don't realize it yet, but you've become a symbol for second chances. Standing on that stage, facing hundreds of faces, I felt my pulse steady, my breath deepen. I wasn't the trembling woman from the night of betrayal anymore. I was the woman who lived to tell it. I once believed silence was strength, that keeping peace meant holding myself together. But silence doesn't keep peace. It buries truth. And buried truth doesn't die. It grows roots, waiting for the day you finally dig it up and plant something better. The room was silent, the kind of silence that listens. I spoke about endurance, about love, about rediscovering identity beyond marriage. I didn't tell them to hate their past or reject forgiveness. I told them to own their stories, to write new chapters instead of reliving old ones. When the applause came, it wasn't loud or chaotic. It was long, steady, emotional. I saw tears in eyes, hands clutching hearts, heads nodding in quiet recognition. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading others out of the same fire I once walked through. After the event, as I stepped backstage, a young intern stopped me. Mrs. Price, my mom left an abusive marriage last year. She watched your interview. You gave her the courage to do it. I felt my throat tighten. Then everything I went through, I whispered, was worth it. Later that evening, I sat alone on my balcony with a cup of tea. The city buzzed below, lights twinkling like constellations. I thought of Daniel, not with anger, not even with pity, but with complete indifference. He was a closed chapter, a story I had outgrown. My phone buzzed with another notification, a clip from my speech trending online, viewed millions of times. The caption read, "She lost her husband, but found her power." For the first time, I didn't shy away from the spotlight. I shared the video on my own page with one simple caption. For every woman who thought it was over, it's not. It's just beginning. Within minutes, comments poured in, words of love, strength, gratitude, and I realized something profound. When you stop chasing closure from others, you create it for yourself. And in doing so, you open doors for countless others to step through. As the night deepened, I looked up at the sky, the same sky that had watched me cry, break, rebuild, and rise. Somewhere in that vastness, I found peace, not because life was perfect, but because I finally belonged to myself. And in that stillness, I whispered one final thought, not as a wife, not as a victim, but as a survivor who had rewritten her ending. He left me to feel younger again. I left him to feel alive again. And between those two choices, I found freedom.
A year had passed since that unforgettable anniversary, the night Daniel thought he would humiliate me, and instead, I began my rebirth. Time has a strange way of softening pain while sharpening perspective. I used to think closure would come with an apology or regret from him, but real closure came quietly, on days when I woke up smiling for no reason, or when I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who no longer flinched at her reflection. My life had changed completely. The bakery I once ran for comfort had now become a symbol of hope. I renamed it Second Bloom, because that's what I was, a flower that bloomed again after being trampled. Women from all over town started visiting, not just for the pastries, but for the warmth, the stories, the laughter that filled the air. It wasn't just a bakery anymore. It was a space for healing. Eleanor often said, "You've turned your heartbreak into a heartbeat for others." And maybe she was right.
I started a small community project teaching women over 40 how to start small businesses, how to reclaim independence, and how to trust themselves again. I didn't do it for recognition, but words spread fast. Soon, I was invited to speak on national television about rebuilding life after betrayal. I remember that day vividly. The soft glow of studio lights, the hum of cameras, the interviewer's voice asking, Naomi, if your husband is watching this right now, what would you say to him? For a second, I froze. The old ache flickered, but it was faint, like a ghost of a wound long healed. Then I smiled. I'd tell him, thank you, I said calmly. Thank you for teaching me that endings aren't always tragedies. Sometimes they're invitations to a better story. The clip went viral. Millions watched. Some cheered, some cried, some finally left toxic relationships after seeing it. My inbox filled with messages, not of pity, but of admiration. People began calling me the woman who chose herself. But life, no matter how strong we become, still finds ways to test us. One rainy evening, as I was closing the bakery, I saw a familiar figure standing by the window. His hair was grayer, his shoulders heavier, but I knew that face. Daniel. He didn't speak first, just stood there, staring at the sign above the door. Second bloom. Finally, he stepped inside, eyes scanning the photos on the wall, smiling customers, women I'd mentored, articles about resilience and rebirth. Then his gaze met mine. You look different, he said softly. I am, I replied. He took a slow breath. I thought about you a lot, about everything. I was stupid. I ruined something perfect. I let his words hang in the air. Once, they would have broken me. Now they meant nothing but wind passing through. I forgive you, Daniel, I said gently, but I don't want you back. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be learned from. He looked down, guilt heavy in his eyes. I just wanted you to know I regret it every day. I nodded. I hope you find peace someday. I already have. He left without another word. I watched him fade into the rain. The man who once defined my life, now just a memory dissolving into the night. When I turned back inside, the warm lights of the bakery glowed like a heartbeat. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. I realized that love didn't end with him. It had transformed, expanded, and multiplied. Months later, I published a book titled After the Vows, Finding Yourself When Love Ends. It became a bestseller, not because it was glamorous, but because it was real. Every chapter carried a piece of me, the pain, the fall, the rebuilding, and the rebirth. During the book launch, Eleanor whispered, "You did it, Naomi. You turned heartbreak into history." But I only smiled. "No," I said softly. "I just told the truth." The audience gave a standing ovation. I wasn't the woman who lost her husband anymore. I was the woman who found herself. That night, when I returned home, I lit a candle and placed it near my window, something I used to do when I prayed for Daniel to come back. But this time, I whispered a different prayer. Thank you, God, for letting him go, so I could finally come home to myself. The candle flickered, and I felt a calm so pure it brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in 25 years, I wasn't waiting for love. I was love. And as I sat there, watching the flame dance, I realized something profound. The greatest revenge isn't hate or success. It's peace. Peace so complete, so unshakable, that no betrayal, no heartbreak, no man can ever take it away again. That was my real anniversary. Not the one that marked years with him, but the one that celebrated the day I finally married my own strength. And if you ever find yourself standing at the ruins of something you thought would last forever, remember my story. You were not broken. You were simply being rebuilt. Because sometimes losing the life you planned is the only way to find the life you deserve.